Ladies and gentlemen, what is diplomatic immunities and privileges? Do you understand about it? Vienna Convention on Diplomatic Relations (BCDR) 1961. Today we are going to discuss about these topics about international relations and diplomacy. The Vienna Convention on Diplomatic Relations 1961 is the most important international treaty governing diplomatic relations between states. It codifies customary international law regarding diplomatic missions, diplomats' rights, duties, immunities, and privileges. Some objectives of the BCDR. BCDR means Vienna Convention on Diplomatic Relations. It have many objectives. Some of them are following: promote friendly relations among states, ensure effective performance of diplomatic functions, protect diplomats from interference by the host state, and facilitate peaceful international relations. Ladies and gentlemen, there are key features. What are the key features of the VCDR, Vienna Convention on Diplomatic Relations? Diplomatic agents are inviolable. Diplomatic premises are protected. Diplomatic communications are confidential, and diplomatic immunity is granted for official functions only. PCDR was adopted in 18 April 1961 and entered into force in 1964. Ladies and gentlemen, what is Vienna Convention on Consular Relations? VCCR 1963. The Vienna Convention on Consular Relations 1963 regulates consular relations between states and defines the functions, privileges, and immunities of consular officials. What are the main purposes? Ladies and gentlemen, protect citizens abroad, promote economic and cultural relations, provide legal and administrative assistance to nationals, and these have major functions of consulars or consuls. Ladies and gentlemen, issuing visas and passports, assisting nationals abroad, registering births, deaths, and marriages, and promoting trade and investment. Ladies and gentlemen, BCCR means Vienna Convention on Consular Relation was adopted in 1963 and entered into force in 1967 AD. What is diplomatic immunities and privileges? Ladies and gentlemen, diplomatic immunity refers to protection granted to diplomats from the jurisdiction of the receiving state or host state. Privileges. We know privileges are special facilities and benefits given to diplomats to perform their duties effectively. What are the major purposes, ladies and gentlemen? The purpose is not to benefit diplomats personally, but to ensure efficient performance of diplomatic missions. What is the famous principle? I know famous principle. Immunity is granted for the office or good function, but not for the individual purpose. Ladies and gentlemen, basis, rationale, or theory of diplomatic immunities and privileges. Point number one, representative theory. Diplomats represent the sovereign state and therefore deserve protection. Are you understand? There was a representative theory once upon a time in the history. Diplomats represent the sovereign state and therefore deserve protection. And point number two, extraterritorial territoriality theory. Historically, embassies were viewed as extension of the sending state's territory. Okay, historically, embassies were viewed as extensions of the sending state's territory. And point number three, functional necessity theory. Ladies and gentlemen, it is the most accepted theory. Functional necessity theory. I think embassies are for functional work and functional necessity. So, immunities are necessary for diplomats to perform official functions independently and effectively. The functional necessity theory is the most widely accepted justification today. Ladies and gentlemen, What is diplomatic immunities and privileges as per BCTR? Personal point number A, personal inviolability. Inviolability means, ladies and gentlemen, non-interference. Personal inviolability. Diplomats cannot be arrested or detained, and host state must protect diplomats from internal and external attacks. Point number B, immunity from criminal jurisdiction. Ladies and gentlemen, diplomats must get immunity from criminal jurisdiction, complete immunity from criminal prosecution. Ladies and gentlemen, point number C, immunity from civil and administrative jurisdiction. Except in limited cases, private immovable property disputes, succession matter, commercial activities outside official functions. Ladies and gentlemen, and point number D, inviolability of diplomatic premises. Police cannot enter embassy premises without consent of diplomats or embassy office. Ladies and gentlemen, point to number E, inviolability of diplomatic bag. Diplomatic bags cannot be opened or seized. Point number A, freedom of communication. Secure communications with home government. Ladies and gentlemen, uh, diplomats must secure communications with their home government or own government. Point number G, tax exemptions. Ladies and gentlemen, exemption from most national and local taxes. That is the immunity or benefit. Ladies and gentlemen, point number 8, yes, customs privileges. Exemption from customs duties on official goods. And point number I, freedom of movement. Diplomats may travel freely except restricted areas. Okay. Ladies and gentlemen, what are the duties of the diplomats? Major duties: representation. Represent the sending state or their own state in the receiving state. Negotiation. Conduct negotiations with host government. Protection. Protect interests of the sending state and its citizens. Information gathering, ladies and gentlemen, collect information through lawful means and promotion of friendly relations, promote trade, tourism, education exchange, and cultural cooperation, cultural exchange. Ladies and gentlemen, obligations under BCTR. Diplomats must respect the laws of the receiving state, not interfere in internal affairs, and use embassy premises only for official functions, official purposes. Ladies and gentlemen, immunity does not mean freedom to violate laws. Diplomats must respect local laws and national laws of the receiving state. Ladies and gentlemen, what are the consular immunities and privileges? Consular officials enjoy limited immunities compared to diplomats. Major consular privileges are personal protection. Host state must protect consular officers. Functional immunity. Immunity applies only to official acts and communication rights. Freedom to communicate with nationals and government. Tax and customs benefit. Limited exemptions. We know diplomats equal to broad immunity, consuls and functional immunity only. Ladies and gentlemen, comparison between diplomatic and consular immunity. We know in the basis of governing convention, BCDR was 1961, okay, was adopted 1961, and BCCR was adopted in 1963. What is the scope? Diplomatic immunity has broad scope, but diplomatic uh, consolation has limited scope. Diplomatic immunity has almost complete immunity in criminal jurisdiction, but I think diplomatic consolation has limited immunity, and I think in the civil jurisdiction Diplomatic immunity, extensive immunity, and consular immunity is only functional immunity. And in the diplomatic immunity, diplomats generally cannot be arrested, but in the consular immunity, diplomats or consular may be arrested in serious crimes and purpose to promote political relation for diplomatic immunity, and we know for consular immunity, citizen services and administration activities. Ladies and gentlemen, we know diplomatic immunity is broader than consular immunity. And what are the criticisms of the VCDR? Immunities and privileges. Ladies and gentlemen, PCDR means Vena Convention in Diplomatic Relation. Point number one, criticisms. Number one, abuse of immunity. Some diplomats misuses immunity to avoid accountability, lack of justice for victims. Victims may not obtain remedies when diplomats commit offenses, and unequal treatment. Ladies and gentlemen, diplomats receive privileges unavailable to ordinary citizen, and conflict with rule of law. Immunity sometimes appears inconsistent with legal equality and counter argument. We know without immunity, diplomats could face a political harassment and be unable to perform duties effectively. Ladies and gentlemen, Nepal and diplomatic immunities. Consolation provisions in the Article 51, there are state policies recognized by Constitution of Nepal 2015. Nepal shall conduct independent foreign policy, promote international peace, and respect international law and treaties. Treaty Act 1990. International treaties ratified by Nepal become enforceable according to national law. Okay. Treaty Act 1990 means Treaty Act 1990 in AD, and 2047 in the BS Bikram Samvat. Ministry responsible. Ministry of Foreign Affairs administers diplomatic relations and implementation of diplomatic privileges in Nepal. Ladies and gentlemen, that's all for today, but we are going to revise these topics. BCDR, Vienna Convention on Diplomatic Relations, adopted in 1961 for diplomats, and VCCR, Vienna Convention on Consular Relations, adopted in 1963 and consular officers. Three theories are there: representative theory, extraterritorial theory, and functional necessity theory. It is the most important and most adopted theory. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, most accepted theory are diplomatic privileges, no arrest, criminal immunity, embassy inviolability, diplomatic back protection, tax exemption, and freedom of communication. And duties of diplomats: representation, negotiation, protection, reporting, and promotion of the relation between two countries, receiving state and sending state. What are the key differences? Ladies and gentlemen, diplomatic immunity equal to broad, consular immunity equal to limited or functional. We know that diplomatic immunities and privileges are granted not for the personal benefit of diplomats, but to ensure the efficient performance of diplomatic functions on behalf of their state. Thank you so much. Don't forget to write your valuable comment in below comment section below. Ladies and gentlemen, don't forget to ring the bell. Don't forget to tap the subscribe button, share button, and like button. Thank you so much.